possible for people. I think that that's going to be the key to all of this change that we're about to go through, is that if we can sort of ease people into it, and make it so that it's just as convenient as all the blends that they've ever gotten, comfortable and cost effective. I think that it might be for a while a little bit more expensive than it, but that's just going to be the price we're going to have to pay.
Yep, for sure. So let's get rolling here. Welcome to the Midday MAHA, your demilitarized zone for discourse. I'm really excited. Today we have Nick PINEAULT. I hope I'm saying that right. He's a journalist and researcher focused on the dangers of EMF radiation, which is a topic that Bobby has talked about quite a bit. And I haven't seen much discussion about it within the MAHA movement on the grassroots end. And I know there's a lot of we don't really know, most of us, where the science is actually backing it and where we're stepping off into tinfoil territory. So I'm excited to talk to Nick and get a good conversation going. A little housekeeping first. We just launched an X community for the Midday MAHA. We're hoping people will join and spend time with us there and get to know each other. We're going to run challenges, weekly MAHA challenges. And we've launched our first one this week, where we want you to show us your healthy oils. Your tallow, your raw or grass-fed butter, your avocado oil, your coconut oil, whatever. Take a picture, show us what you got. We have a wonderful prize this week, sponsored by the Beef Initiative, who have been so great to us. We're going to get a $50 discount to one random participant who shows us their healthy oils. And we're giving double entries to people who haven't really dug into healthy oils yet and replace their unhealthy seed oils, their canola, their Wesson, their palm shortening, all that crap. You'll get double points if you show us that you're throwing out some crappy oil and getting something good. So I'm really, really excited about that. Join the X community. It is called the Midday MAHA community. We'll get the link up in the nest here shortly. And just real quick first, because we've been focusing so much on this Monsanto immunity bill stuff, especially in Georgia, I want to let Danielle from the Council of Domestic Relations give us an update on that, because it sounds like we have a Georgia-based organization to give our love and attention to that is trying to really work hard on this issue. So Danielle, you want to go for it?
Sure, thanks. So this bill, the pesticide immunity bill, that would prevent you from being able to sue companies like Monsanto across the board, has already passed through the State House, and the session actually ended in Georgia on Friday. So at this point, this is strictly a veto effort. We need people calling. Calls are preferred over emails. Emails, the legislators are kind of tossing out. They think they're all coming from the same place, like not really a bot, but they think it's coming from a small pool of people. So we need just calling. It takes 1 minute. The number is there in the top. If you guys can click in the nest and go to that page, that's the Georgia Coalition for Vaccine Choice. They've been working as the boots on the ground with these lawmakers, and they're the ones really spearheading the biggest effort in the state to get this vetoed. And Governor Kemp has 40 days to do that. I believe that's going to be around the 13th of May. So yeah, just dial that number, tell them you want to express, your concern over SB 144 and that you're asking the Governor Kemp veto it, and they will tally that on the record. But also, Georgia Coalition for Vaccine Choice, they do a lot of great things. They've got a really big base on Facebook. They're trying to grow the same here on X. So if you can go over to their page and just give them a follow and share their call to action, that would be a huge boost for us right now. We know that veto efforts are really hard, but if we can make it happen in the first week or two of session ending, it's more likely to happen. Otherwise, he may just let the bill sit there and not sign it, and then it will automatically become law, even if he does nothing. So we need loud voices on that front. Please go to their page and share it. Tell your people in Georgia. That's the org to touch base with. They know.
And what's the handle for their page again?
It is at GA Vaccine Choice.
Got it. So at GA Vaccine Choice, and they're pushing hard on this Monsanto immunity bill to get Governor Kemp in Georgia to veto it. This is the front lines of that issue right now. Whichever way that shakes out, it then comes next looking like Florida and Tennessee. But this is an opportunity. Let's draw a line in the sand. If we can make them fail here, it's a lot easier to knock these down in the next states. So go ahead and follow that org and let's get going. Adam, and then I really want to jump into this conversation with Nick.
Yeah, 100%, bro. I look forward to posting my oils. I've got some really good oils, from black seed oil to a bunch of stuff. But in regards to the pesticide bill, I saw that in Florida we have I've been trying to bring attention to this. We have SB Senate Bill 56, which is like basically banning well, it was supposed to be banning what's it called, SAIs, stratospheric aerosol injections, which is chemtrails essentially. But they flipped that bill upside down, so it's basically like to vote no on it is important. And then there's House Bill 129, HB 129 in Florida, which has to do with pesticides and giving immunity to pesticide people, manufacturers, and giving them immunity against lawsuits and stuff.
Got it.
Yeah, we're actually working on those bills too. We're just focusing on Georgia right now because it's the most dire, and signature is coming up soon. But we're working on both of those bills in Florida, and there's actually, I think there's a total of 32 the chemtrail bills nationwide now. So we're getting data.
Yeah,
that'll be a whole other show on its own.
Yep, and this is another reason to join the new Midday MAHA community. It's a great place for us to inform each other and have conversations about this stuff that's less ephemeral, right? Because we're listening and you're in the conversation, so it's hard to go and act. But we'll be posting there with action items and updates on bills and legislation around the country, and hopefully you all can update us on that as well. Because 50 states, a bunch of different issues. It's really hard for any one or even a few of us to keep up with this stuff. So as a grassroots, we keep each other informed and activated. So thank you guys so much. And a big thanks as always to America Mission for being so supportive and getting us streaming on all these different platforms. It really boosts the signal. I'm so grateful for you guys. So now, Nick, turning to you, man, you've been studying EMF radiation for a number of years now. Do you have a spiel for us? Do you want more of a conversation? Love to open this up to Q&A near the end. How do you want to run this conversation, buddy?
Well, I can maybe just give the short version of what my work is and why I think people should think about EMFs if they want, to make America healthy again. I would argue the entire planet healthy again, because of course, a lot of the issues that the MAHA movement talks about are applicable to almost every nation out there, except in the case of EMFs, electromagnetic fields, electromagnetic radiation that's emitted by our modern devices. Most people listening to this talk right now are using a device that emits electromagnetic radiation to connect to a cell phone antenna or to Wi-Fi or to connect their computer to their Wi-Fi router, for example. And all these exposures are thought to be potentially carcinogenic. And really the industry since I would say after World War II, at first it was the military, but eventually the start of the telecom industry has been denying any sort of health impacts. There's been a few exceptions on the political side. RFK Jr. is one of these people who has talked about the reality, which is that all these exposures are cumulative and are a stressor to the human body. We should aim to minimize our exposure, and especially minimize exposure in pregnant moms, in young kids, teenagers, but also in adults. When we are in close proximity with our phones, there are risks associated with that, including different types of tumors, risks that can go up, but also impairment of fertility or loss of sleep and things like that. The reason that RFK has been talking about it is, of course, he's been personally involved in different lawsuits, whether it's people who claim that their cell phone has triggered a brain tumor, whether it's acoustic neuroma, which is a non-carcinogenic type of tumor that can lead to many complications, including death or hearing loss, glioblastoma, which is, one arguably the deadliest type of cancer that can happen in the brain, parotid gland cancer, those salivary glands, or even thyroid cancer and breast cancer. We don't nearly have enough data to conclude all of these things, but the point for the last, I would argue, almost 30 years. At the beginning of the rollout of cell towers and smartphones, even when we had these Nokia bricks like the Nokia 9000, where you had to have, a separate antenna on top of the car, and it was almost a joke at that point. The cell phones were so big, so clunky, and yet at that point we already had early data on the fact that, geez, there are some people that report an increase in cancer, and some lawsuits had been won at that point. There was controversy over brain cancer, but the at that point, of course, it was a very small fraction of the population that was using these technologies. Now in 2025, fast forward, we're talking about almost every human being on the planet is using a phone of some kind. Even, I think, you have nomadic tribes that have cell phones in the middle of the Sahara Desert. So, the reality is that not only are adults using these, but also children. And our safety standards are based on 5 monkeys and 8 rats, the early studies, which is, a complete joke as far as toxicology goes. This has been reported by a group called the ICBE Group, International Commission for the Biological Effects of EMFs. It's a group of international scientists that are trying to sound the alarm, but many other scientists have been trying to sound the alarm for around 30 years on that. Things have gotten worse and worse and worse because the technological movement is really going against these recommendations. So what we're facing is early dangers that are ignored, just like asbestos or smoking. An industry that has a lobbying power, some claim, is bigger than big pharma. So this is obscuring the science and preventing us from having a clear idea of what action should be taken on the public health standpoint. And we're using the opposite of the precautionary principle, which would state that if there are early indicators of harm in the population and scientific uncertainty, then the last thing we want to do is ignore it. The first thing we want to do is start telling the population to reduce exposure or go with regulations, still allowing the free market. I'm personally all for it, except if a device is dangerous for people, either people need to be warned about it, or maybe the devices could be designed in a way that is less harmful or eventually not harmful, of course. But that's not what most people think when they think of a cell phone or AirPods or Wi-Fi. They think these things have been rolled out, they must be safe, and they kind of use the same logic that unfortunately we all go into when we don't know about a topic, and we say, well, if it's sold in a grocery store, it's likely safe. Well, not so much, as we see, with the grass, generally recognized as safe loophole. There's a bunch of different ingredients that were allowed by the FDA. It's pretty much the same thing when it comes to your phone and all these technologies. So for the last 8+ years, I've been focusing on the science, trying to make sense of it, and then connecting with scientists and doctors that are reporting some people are literally getting sick, not initially from just using cell phones, but sometimes is the placement of cell phone towers, for example. So it's a huge topic to unveil. It does fall into fear mongering and conspiracy theories at times. It is hard to navigate and understand what is true, what is, an exaggeration of the situation. But for sure, what I would say is this: in the MAHA movement, it's barely talked about, and yet it is one of the environmental toxins that is at this point the fastest growing, and that is also one of the most studied of all time. So it's a very bizarre situation where the science is there, and yet the industry continues to repeat that everything is safe. There's no effect. Look somewhere else. And within MAHA and other leaders around the world, some people are starting to notice, because they spend time reading the independent scientists that I told you about, but a lot of them are still skeptical to this day. Even people that are very aware of other toxins, they say, well, this EMF stuff, it's probably tinfoil hatter, right? So I still come across that. I'm going to Austin next week for the Health Optimization Summit, and I hope to convince a few of these influencers, that have large podcasts and whatnot. But most people, I would say, 95 to 99% of everyone who has a large podcast in the world has failed to report on this, including, the Joe Rogan, the Peterson, and Max Lugavere, and several. All these people I respect, by the way. It's nothing against them. It's just that the reason they haven't looked into it, I think, is there's always this fear of sounding crazy or featuring the wrong expert and then having to feel, lose credibility over it. But in reality, it is a credible topic. You could say it's controversial, but what isn't these days? But there's plenty of science to at least start telling the population to be prudent. But instead, most people don't know about the dangers and then expose themselves and their kids and everyone else more and more and more with every passing year. So that would be my my short elevator pitch here.
That's a good one, man. I really appreciate it. It seems like corporations, and I'm a big fan of free market enterprise and all that as well. But it seems like corporations with these misaligned interests again and again run roughshod over the needs of like the health of people and the land, the air, the water, the soil, everything when it comes to their bottom line. They did it to us with leaded fuel for decades.
Yep.
They did it to us with cigarettes. They did it to us with genetically modified foods and with all sorts of medications. And this does seem like just one more where they're just going to run right over us and let this continue to poison us. It's a really scary situation when you think of how quickly it continues to permeate our lives and in more and more profound ways, right? Like I have to admit, I am wildly addicted to my phone.
Mm-hmm.
And for a while there, like a year or two at least, I was using AirPods like many hours a day.
Yep.
And you would say that wireless headphones increase sort of the risk?
Well, really the problem here is that we don't just use a phone nowadays. Even the standards were based on one cell phone call for 6 to 30 minutes and how they test them. So it's short-term acute exposure. The concerns of scientists is long-term, I would say even lifetime in some cases. If we talk about cancer risks, the lag between exposures and then your risk of cancer could be 5 decades. And that's known from exposures to other carcinogens. So what they're concerned about is what is the cumulative dose of exposure from your AirPods, plus that phone in your pocket, plus your alarm clock happens to be Bluetooth, and you have a strong router at home, and turns out you're in a city like I am right now in Montreal, Quebec, as I'm doing this call. And turns out I'm exposed to a bunch of cell towers on top of it all. So it's really we don't have a good portrait of what is the real dose of EMF that could be safe. And I have a bunch of different examples I could give you. One of them that came to my attention very recently from a biophysicist from the University of Athens is that the more you're exposed to ionizing radiation, which think about X-rays, let's say people who operate X-ray machines and are still partially exposed, let's say dentists or operators for certain scans, or pilots, for example, or flight attendants that are exposed to ionizing radiation, and it's a known cancer risk in their life. There's a synergy between those exposures that are ionizing radiation and then the Wi-Fi exposure on a plane. And there is animal data showing that when you combine the two, 1 + 1 does not equal 2, it equals 3. So in other words, you have a synergistic toxicity between different agents. So what this means is that our standards of what is the safe dose of ionizing radiation for a pilot throughout the lifetime are probably miscalculated, because now we've added the Wi-Fi in the last 10 years, 15 years. And in some flights, it's still being rolled out with more and more and more powerful technology because people enjoy it and they want to stay connected. But there's a price to pay for these exposures. And so that's just for ionizing radiation. Imagine now we change that for lead. Well, I know something, I know a thing or two about lead because I've been tested for lead and my results were very, very bad. I was surprised. I'm only 37. I've been staying in shape and eating very clean for 15 years. I am nowhere near seed oils, and yet my lead levels are sky high. There's lead in tap water. There's lead in, certain foods are more prone to lead contamination, including protein powders or cacao. And it's kind of a crazy environment out there. And we're all doing our best to avoid lead because it's a known neurotoxin. The right level of lead should be 0, but most people have at least a little bit. There is sufficient data to say that the more lead you have, or the combination of lead plus these EMFs from your phone and Wi-Fi, again, 1 + 1 equal 3 or equal 10, where you have a synergistic toxicity that is not just additive, but that is multiplicative. And that's concerning because it means, well, have we gotten our standards wrong for all these other environmental toxins? Because now we add a wild card in the environment, another stressor that makes us less able to handle every other toxic exposure out there.
That's wild, man. That was actually going to be my number one question is the heavy metal toxication that so many of us are dealing with an amplifying effect on the dangers of EMF? Because of course it's going to interact with a lot of these metals, right?
Definitely, it's an interaction, and it's also our ability. It's our ability to cope with almost every stressor can be hindered. There's probably multiple. There's a ton of different mechanisms that could explain that, but just the lack of sleep angle or the fact that EMF radiation might interfere with sleep is enough. A lot of people don't realize, and to me that's crazy because I've been in this world for a decade, but to this day I still surprise people when I post things on the internet and say your cell phone might interfere with your sleep, not because of notifications, not because of blue light, because we know that will keep you more awake than you'd like, but the EMF radiation that is invisible is picked up by your body in multiple ways. One of the ways is that it will change the way your brain waves are expressed, or how your brain is able to go through the proper brain waves to fall into sleep. There's a specific schedule that your body goes into, and when you have a cell phone near your head, so it's by your nightstand, for example, or maybe it's under your pillow. For a lot of people, they fall asleep with their phone. They have a meditation app on, for example. So it's very, very common that people sleep with an EMF emitting device, not knowing that it will reduce their sleep quality. And to this day, what is especially crazy is that the early studies on that, on again the Nokia phones, or maybe it was like Blackberries in 2006, there was a few small experiments on a few hundred people showing that 30 minutes of cell phone exposure induced what researchers called cell phone induced insomnia, where they thought they were sleeping, but they didn't sleep for real before an hour. So it was a sleep onset of an hour where they were kind of going into a coma instead of sleeping, in the sense that their brain waves were not ready yet. They had to recover from the exposure. So it's a very simple thing to understand in the end. If you're wondering how come a cell phone that is such a low signal, it doesn't burn your body, it doesn't seem to do anything, most people cannot feel it, hear it, and smell it, how come it can displace brain waves? Well, your brain waves, your brain neurons emit a type of radiation that is electricity, and that is at a power that is tremendously lower than your cell phone. It's a wattage, it's a power that is very, very small. And therefore, there can be an EMF interference, an electromagnetic interference between the signal from your phone and the signals in between your cells, in between bacteria in your body, and in between anything in your body, because we are inherently bioelectrical. And this is this type of interference that is completely ignored by industry. They prefer to talk about safety standards that are based on thermal effect, like we don't want people to overheat or to have burns or to have a sort of cell phone induced fever, because we know that's damaging. There's not even controversy that if you have very, very strong cell phone radiation, you could cook someone. I mean, the microwave oven is 1,000 watts of power. It's in a similar frequency than Wi-Fi, and yes, it can cook something. Your phone is 1, 2 watts, it cannot cook something, but that's not the point. The point is that it can induce subtle effects in the cells that have downstream consequences, like oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is simply you're aging faster, you're stressing your biology, and you're hindering your ability to respond to any other type of stress in your life.
Right. We're looking at this on the wrong scale. It doesn't
Yes.
take nearly as much as they're trying to make it sound like it does to have an impact on us, and we're literally stewing in it 24/7.
Exactly.
With all the towers and with our Wi-Fi routers and with our phones right next to us all the time, it's having a real impact. This doesn't surprise me at all. I've got some other questions, but I want to get to Adam and then Kim. Did y'all still have something?
Go ahead, Adam, and then I'll go.
Yeah, I definitely love this topic. I don't love the fact that we have to discuss it, but
Yeah.
you know, it's something that I've been personally harping about, you know, for quite a while. You know, I used to tell. I had a anatomy and physiology teacher in high school, and this is back in the 90s, and she used to tell us, like, boys, don't put your cell phones on your lap. You know, make sure you put it on the center console, because of, you know, she was, you know, warning us not to get testicular cancer, essentially. But, you know, this is something I've been aware about and looking into for a long time, you know, as far as EMF. And, you know, I personally, like, on my Wi-Fi router, I turn off the Wi-Fi. I run Ethernet cable throughout my house. I try to lower as much as possible. But where I live right now, it's changed up a little bit. I have weak signal as far as you know, any sort of cellular signal, which is a good thing. So I have to take the lesser of two evils and connect via Wi-Fi for cellular. But I did want to mention there are options to turn off your 5G on your Android. You could go to cellular and then go to cellular options and then go to 4G LTE, which is a less powerful frequency. 5G, once they came out with it, I had, you know, my 5G phone, my hand would go numb. So you could feel the effects of the radiation there. So like I definitely made sure that I turned that off. There are just so many different things. Well, in regards to the 5G that they rolled out during 2020, there is like it affected birds' migratory patterns, which is bad. It affected bees' ability to navigate and find its hive, for instance, and this is very devastating to pollination, which is very important for our, you know, our livelihood. We need pollination to have food and grow food. So bees are like our best friends, and you know, it's I've been a big advocate for bees for a long time. And in regards to these, you know, these towers going up, one last thing here is a lot of these 5G towers are being set up next to elementary schools, which is, or you know, soccer fields and things like that. So that's something we definitely have to be definitely aware of, and hopefully roll back on the 5G. In my opinion, I think it's too much. 4G is like enough, more than enough, and that's not that great either. But if we could be more aware of this and how dangerous it is to humanity, it's important. And I'll yield there. Thank you, Adam.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Kim.
Yeah, so thanks, Adam, and thank you for walking me through turning off my 5G on my phone like about 6 months ago. I didn't even realize that it was automatically on, and I didn't realize that you had the option. I found that there was no difference in my service, so going to that LTE was no problem at all. I have been sort of deep in this for a very long time. My husband and my son like to make fun of me because I do wear magnets. And I'll find the brand name of the magnets that I wear. But have you seen, or have they done a lot of studies as far as how magnets or wearing them can help with reducing the effects, or the, you know, allowing it to even get to your body?
Yeah, this is a good question, Nick, and I wonder if this gets into sort of parsing what's science backed and what's sort of like tinfoil. When we get into these issues, there's a big opportunity for snake oil salesmen to say, "Oh, we've got the solution right here," and it's like, do we?
Well, I think that we have, this is you mentioned it earlier. There's so many different things that we're finding out, right? So let's just rip the Band-Aid off, get it over with, and then we can have everybody collectively looking for solutions. We are a very innovative people.
Right. So Nick, do we know anything about that?
Not much. There's no independent scientists that have tried to study the different devices that claim to help us be more readily able to cope with this radiation. There's many different products that appeared in the last 8 years, and it's very, very hard to navigate because it's kind of a question of are we telling people to use a sort of magic pill and tell them everything's going to be okay? If we the problem I have with it is like trying to say, well, instead of filtering your water, we know there's lead in your water. You could still drink the lead, but I have here this glutathione product. It's an antioxidant that helps you detox from lead. It's a bit backwards. You should probably filter your tap water and then add the glutathione as well. Why not? So the reality is that avoidance right now or reduction of exposure should really be your primary concern. And it does not mean to stop using your cell phone. It does not mean, to start living in a cave. Good luck with that, because the moment you get out of the cave, you get StarX now and Starlink. So the reality is that it's being rolled out worldwide. There's no escaping it completely. And then there are ways to use the devices on an everyday basis in a much safer way. And the reality also, I have to recognize, it's stupid and it's so nonsensical that in 2025, we have to tell everyday people to learn this stuff until they have like a PhD understanding, and then they're able to use their devices safely. The devices should be made safe by manufacturers, of course, and it's going to take a while, but right now we're just in the midst of this nonsense where the safety limits make no sense. People are having health impacts, and we need to protect ourselves individually while, of course, we try to change the rules. And some countries have done way better than the US or Canada or even Australia. These are probably the three more permissive countries on the planet when it comes to EMF radiation and cell tower placements. But other countries have restricted where you can place the towers. They have even restricted how much cell phones can emit and where things can be placed. It's simple. Just one change. If I could get to RFK Jr.'s desk tomorrow morning and say at HHS, what should we do? Well, first, you would force the FCC to look at safety standards, taking into account all the scientific studies that were shown in the 2021 lawsuit that they lost. The FCC lost in court, and the judges were very unimpressed by the FCC, who said, no, we will reaffirm our safety limits because they are safe, and there's no reason to think they should change. And in reality, they ignored, just 10,000 pages that were sent by scientists. So they completely ignored everything, all the science, and said, no, they're safe. And of course, why did they do that? Well, the FCC is not a health agency. It's an industry agency for the cell phone industry. So that's why they did that. So we need to either change who's responsible for cell phone safety and that radiation safety, or completely rehold the FCC. I don't know what else can be done, but for sure, these rules need to be changed and the cell phones could be made safer. So I would look at these things at a policy level, and then individual level, minimize exposure, pre-download content as much as you can. For example, an example I gave this morning on a podcast discussion is whenever I have my kid in the car and maybe we have a long drive, 2-hour drive, sometimes we can bring a tablet with a show, but TV show, Netflix, Disney app, anything. But all of these things can be pre-downloaded on the tablet, stored locally, and then you do not have to connect your tablet to a 4G, 5G LTE network for to do the streaming, the entire 2-hour drive with you and your entire family in the car. It requires a little bit of planning, but just like not eating McDonald's at every single meal requires planning. It's not that complicated, but you have to be aware and then actually decide, okay, let's make this a priority. I'm going to lower my individual EMF exposure.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd love to circle back after we get to Coyote and talk a little more about sort of our global infrastructure for internet and sort of the appliances in our home, and what you were saying, how it actually wouldn't be that hard to produce these devices to operate in a safer way. But first, I want to hear from Coyote. Hey, man, thanks for being with us.
I appreciate y'all having me, and it's a great discussion. It's something I need to pay attention more to, because you know, as we go, the more and more I use cell phones and earbuds, all the stuff that we're talking about. My question may seem a little like you know, very beginner, but maybe this would be good for some of the beginner listeners in the audience as well. Is there a difference between like Starlink and you know, like the AT&T towers, if you catch what I'm saying, as far as like the EMF, like the amount of the radiation that it transmit? Like, is there any perks to having Starlink over some of these 5G towers that are out there?
Yeah, it's a very good question. In fact, I think it's the first time I hear a question like this, and it's definitely a good question to ask, because if we're trying to design, let's say, an entire grid of wireless signals, is it safer for people or for the planet to use cell towers, or is it safer to use the satellites? You know, there's pros and cons with the satellites. I would say, as far as individual exposure goes, when you're receiving Starlink on your router, the router is mostly receiving. It's also, I don't know if there's an uplink signal, so I don't know if the router itself or the dish, not the router, but the dish is sending out. There are certain dishes that are sending out. So placing that dish not right next to the wall where you have your pillow would be a good idea. So just placement of that machine. And then the router itself, you know, I've seen routers installed in bedrooms under the bed. It makes no sense. In fact, I was in Austin, when was it, 2018, and I recorded the video for my YouTube channel just showing people in a hotel room and EMF sources. And I have this EMF detector. And each time I go towards my pillow, it's in the red zone. And I say, wait a minute, guys, I think I found something. And I pull out the mattress that must have weighed about like 80 pounds. And after a lot of, you know, pushing it aside, I discovered the router was under the bed. So it was a high-end hotel in Austin. Why would they do that? Well, of course, they think there's no impact, but it interferes with sleep. At a minimum, it should be put in the corridor where you still have decent connectivity and you have distance from people. So this is just an example of what needs to be done across all different devices, making sure that people are exposed to the minimum dose possible. If you're using cell towers instead, you would have the cell towers exposing everyone to greater amounts of radiation compared to Starlink because of the signal intensity drop-off. Starlink is installed at a certain distance. I cannot recall exactly at what distance, because there's so many satellite projects that will be rolled out at different heights, different altitudes from the planet. But I would say there's pros and cons with both approaches, except we're not nearly studying enough the impact on the planet. In fact, there's one geophysicist, Stefan Burns, that I'm starting to connect with, and listening to his show. He talks about the fact that the more electrified the planet becomes with human-made sources, such as power lines for electricity, but also cell phone towers, and the more we see an instability in the ionosphere, this natural protective sphere around the planet that is electrical. So that's a first consideration. The second consideration is the impact of blasting the entire planet with radiation and the low-level, subtle impacts on nature, pollinators, bacteria, and that's barely studied. The third thing I'll say is that when you add more mass to the ionosphere, you can disrupt weather patterns, you can disrupt all sorts of things. And there's a lot of speculation in that area. It can get into, conspiracy theory territory where people say, oh, they're causing hurricanes, they're causing this, causing that. I don't know, but for sure, at a minimum, we should have studied the impacts of having thousands of satellite launches, not only because the satellites are going to disrupt the ionosphere, but because launching them requires rockets, which take fuel, which pollute the atmosphere, right? So there are estimations that just the rocket launches in the future will pollute the atmosphere as much as the global airline industry. So the reality is that, it's out of control because no one right now is responsible for regulating space. And when I learned that from an attorney, I said, wait a minute, you're telling me that space doesn't have a jurisdiction? Well, not really. The FCC in the US tell Musk and the Starlink team, launch as many satellites as you like because you're approved. You can launch these satellites. Okay. The satellites eventually are in orbit and they go right above the country of Italy in Europe. And now the Italians complain because they say, well, now you're in breach of our federal laws for light pollution, because the way they reflect the light back and they in fact contribute to light pollution. But the FCC responds, well, it's not our jurisdiction, right? We launched the satellites over the US and now they're over Italy, but it's not our problem. So it's a mess out there where you are rolling out these technologies without much regard to the health of everyone or sustainability, not sustainability in the way that it's been weaponized by, many governmental NGOs and things like that. Just sustainability in the sense that what is the consequence of your satellites over the next decades? Will you impact other things that matter to people, including, well, let's say having a planet for the next generations? And the reality is that the way that these technologies are being rolled out is, in my sense, completely reckless. It's a, I'll start swearing if I continue. So, it's a hell show. I don't know how else to tell you. It's complete improvisation. And in reality, when you do have the satellites, you don't have to put as many towers. So maybe you don't harm people with towers, but you harm other things. But who knows what is the right situation or the right grid, because we don't have the right science or the right regulations to try to make sense of how can we build an infrastructure that serves people, serves our needs, serves people in time of need. Like there's a hurricane, people need to communicate. There's pros for the satellites in many of these situations, but how many satellites are safe for the planet? We don't even know. So it's complete improvisation. So I cannot really vouch for satellites and be excited. Yay, let's build, let's launch all these satellites project. There's 1 million satellites that are planned in the next 30 years by various corporations. I don't know if half of them or a tenth or a thousandth will be rolled out. But even if it's that, it might cause all sorts of problems. And try to say then to governments, well, let's have a mission and we're going to retrieve these satellites that are spinning at a completely mad speed around the planet. It turns out the satellites are supposed to crumble and become fine dust that is reintroduced in the atmosphere. So when you look into it, you discover, oh my God, we're really putting ourselves in trouble for the future. And that's what I hate about these new technologies and how they're being rolled out right now.
Yeah, like it's just another example of corporate interests rushing ahead without knowing the dangers, because they can offload those onto the commons anyway. So they're just going to run just as fast ahead as they can, especially because once it gets going, then they've got competition to worry about. So they have to go even faster just to gain and then maintain a market share. Yeah, that's pretty scary. Billy.
Hey, what's up, guys? Hey, this is Billy. I'm also with Council on Domestic Relations. So I want everybody, if you can, make sure you follow us there. It's the eagle up there at the top. Danielle is there. She's one of the speakers. Hit that and follow us. We're doing some great work along with Damo and Kristina and everybody up here. Thank you, Nick, for joining us today. I wanted to give my quick story of falling into the EMF thing when they put a smart meter on my house, and I quickly went and did a little research and realized I didn't want it on here. And then I went and bought a tri-meter. As a radio guy, I thought I knew about frequencies, but once I got the tri-meter and I started reading, I was like, what am I? Magnetic, RF, electric. I didn't know what I was looking at. Didn't know what I was, so I had to go and start searching and looking and parsing data to try to figure out what was bad. The only thing I could figure out was that very large microbursts of radiation were about 15 feet from my son's head. So I got that removed, and then they came back out 6 months later and installed it again without my knowledge. It was there for a couple of weeks, and I found out that I had to give them a written letter to get it removed. Finally, it's removed. I've done some other things around my house that I urge other people to do. One of them is I bought a remote control power adapter that I plug my Wi-Fi router into. And then that's like a little car remote control. It sits up at my by my bedside. And when everybody's off the computer, 10, 11, I hit that button and it disconnects my Wi-Fi router from power. So it kind of turns it off. You can get those on Amazon. I also use them in my fabrication shop to turn on remote pieces of equipment that I don't have to crawl back and turn them on. But my question for you, Nick, is going back to kind of more a I gave up my microwave over 20 years ago from the same type of thing. But from a layman's standpoint, should we be buying a tri-meter? Should we be walking around our house? If so, can you explain the difference between RF, electromagnetic, and electronic radiation? What's the basic? What should we be looking at in our homes? Just baseline, layman, real simple. What should we be doing?
Yeah, you really put me on a bad spot here. I'm trying to summarize a topic that is quite complicated in a few sentences. I would say in a few years ago, I did recommend using these simple EMF detectors around the home. I recommend them less and less, in the sense that many people are recommended that to, including my own dad, bought them and then did nothing with them because they're kind of overwhelmed looking at the numbers and things like that. So first, before considering a meter, I would say just try to clean up your bedroom, turn off Wi-Fi at night, turn off the cell phones if you can. If you cannot or you don't want to, because this is your line of emergency for your kids, for your wife, for your friends, put it in another room or as far away from your pillow as possible. You can consider Ethernet cables, wired solutions throughout the home. I'd say not even 0.1% of people listening to this right now will do it. However, it is a secure way and a very reliable way to connect your computer to the internet, especially if you have a workstation, you work at home, like so many people these days. The computer in front of me is wired. So yes, I'm exposed to the towers. However, at that distance from my laptop, about 2 feet from my face, the Wi-Fi chip would expose me to more intense levels of radiation compared to the cell phone towers in Montreal. So the reality is that many of the different devices in close proximity to your body, including your phone or wireless anything that are touching your body, are more concerning to me and to scientists that study this topic compared to the towers. The towers are concerning also, but a lot of people are kind of wrongfully focused at those ugly or dangerous towers. I would say about the different types of EMFs, there are different types that can be measured, and there's a profession that exists that not all people might have heard about. There are building biologists. These people are also called EMF mitigation specialists, are EMF surveyors. So they have the equipment, not only one EMF detector, but they have, sometimes 10 or 15 different machines that they bring to the table to try to map out everything you're exposed to in your home and try to make sense of it and then explain to you, okay, well, I recommend these changes. I see the smart meter there. That is, your water or electricity meter or gas meter even that's emitting radiation. And I noticed that it's too close to someone who sleeps there. So we're going to shield it or we're going to have it replaced. I see that your router doesn't have a timer on. So we're going to add a Christmas light timer on that, or have exactly what you talked about, Billy, having, some way of turning it off without having to get out of your bed after you've read your favorite book, because most people in that case would say, oh, okay, you know what, this is too annoying. I don't want to be cold. I don't want to get up and go in the basement, turn it off. So it's easy to have these steps done. And I would say, instead of starting to go around the home and detect radiation, I would consider hiring a professional like that. The reason I'm saying that is that it sometimes I just tell people to get a meter and it causes more confusion than is helpful. For some people that are really motivated, or maybe more like an engineer like you, Billy, someone who has worked in the field or in radio or just has an interest for it, then grabbing a meter, looking at readings is very nice. It gives you a sense of trying to estimate what emits the worst type of radiation. There is wireless, like the Wi-Fi and smart phones and Bluetooth and cell towers, but there's also other types of fields that are emitted by different electronics. So just the fact of having, imagine some people in their room, it gets very hot in some areas of the world, of course, and some people use fans. Well, a very strong fan might create a magnetic field around it that is not wireless radiation. That's a much lower frequency radiation, but it remains that this radiation is inherently artificial and can interfere with sleep. So with a detector, you might be able to figure out, well, okay, that fan needs to be at 6 feet from my pillow and not 2. So that's an example of where you find the right amounts, the right dosage of EMF in your everyday life. So I would say for 99% of people out there, it's probably not their priority to measure their environment, but to start with habits, simple habits, like what do you do when you carry your phone? Is it always emitting in your groin area? And even when you get to the office or you sit down on your sofa, you forget to take it out. That can be changed. It is more difficult to do it than purchasing something magic that you install on your computer and then thinking it's going to protect you, for example, but it can be done. And it's just a change of habit, just like changing the way you cook or changing the way you shop at the grocery store.
That's really good, Nick. And what you were describing there is basically like the inverse square law, right? That
Yes.
for every, say, foot further away, you can get that emitter from your body. You're improving or reducing the exposure by a lot, which is why it's especially scary when you've got the AirPods like right in your ear or the phone right up to your head or in your pocket all the time, versus even a couple of feet away is just a huge improvement.
Well, in fact, in scientific studies, that this is why I'm concerned about AirPods, is that the real exposure, I haven't seen real exposure measurements from the industry about what is the exposure to the point of the AirPod, the part that is in your ear. And because each millimeter that you go further through your brain, you increase the radiation 10%, and it's exponential. It's kind of mad when you think about it. And even a cell phone, if you decided to talk on the phone and separate the phone 3 millimeters from your body, you would in fact drop off the signal strength by a lot. I'm recommending more than 3 millimeters if possible. However, the reality is that the signal intensity will drop off. So therefore, some of the risk will drop off exponentially as you create distance. And the goal is also to think not in terms of that one phone call you had last month and kind of stress about it, but it's your cumulative dose over a month, over a year, over a decade that really matters.
Right. And so this is why it's so important to have like wired headphones and things like that.
Yeah.
And I've even seen some where even the speaker magnet is further down in the wire, though I've seen the designs of those can be a little more inconvenient. We've got Destiny, then Adam, then Southern Belle.
I want to chime in real quick. One last thing, Demo. I want to make sure everybody knows that you can go to EMFhazards.com. Nick is part of this online EMF conference. Again, it's just EMFhazards.com. It's online April 10th through the 15th. It's free. We've got some amazing speakers there. I think there's pretty much 6 each day. I just signed up. Very easy, EMFhazards.com.
Awesome. Billy, can you put that up in the nest for us?
Can I do that as not as a host? I don't know.
As a speaker, you absolutely can.
It's up
Okay,
there.
cool.
You just have to swipe over a couple.
Oh,
okay, cool. There you go.
cool. Yep, it is the second one on
there it
there
is.
if we just swipe once. Yeah, everybody check that out. I was going to make sure that Nick mentioned it. And we have about 15 minutes left with Nick. So Destiny, Adam, and then Southern Belle.
Yeah, no, this is a great conversation, you guys. I'm very passionate about this. Because I personally am like, I don't know how many people believe this, but it's just the life I live. But I'm like extremely electrosensitive. I'm usually outside on my porch because if I'm around all the, you could do everything you can to like reduce waves, but it's just, it gets too much. And I put in the purple pill for people, for anyone really, just all my prior threads on EMF, including the 1967 CIA studies that were pretty much stolen from the Russians, where they had, I guess, like the first real tests on non-ionizing millimeter wave EMF. So essentially modern day 5G. But this is way back in the day. They had classified it till 2012. But it's, of course, unclassified now. And so I put that in the purple pill. It's about 68 pages, if I'm not mistaken. And I personally, if you just want to jump ahead in some of them, I think that the last study is like pages 58 through 68 are probably the most informative on the biological effects that they documented. It's really well done studies, because it's crazy we don't get them in our country. But we do apparently in other places around the world. And I wanted to say about those ear pods, I definitely am a wired headphones person. I don't care how dumb it makes me look. Like I just personally, I get so many headaches from just everything. I have to do it. And I noticed a lot of resistance with kids because I have godchildren and I have a goddaughter who's going on 14 this month. And she got AirPods for Christmas. And I'm sure everyone's seen this happen and they're super excited because they were the most popular gift, by the way, the year 2020 and 2021 and 2022 for Christmas from children was AirPods, which is horrifying. And the reason why is, I don't know if anyone remembers, but back in like 2016, maybe probably earlier than that, Dr. Dre, the guy who makes the Beats headphones, had a brain bleed that they never got down to the bottom of. They never investigated that. He was young and healthy. I think he was still in his late 40s at the time. And he had a brain bleed. And everyone was like, I don't know how that could happen. I could tell you how that could happen. Those Beats headphones, most people, this is what I say to scare people straight away from these AirPods. The bone that covers where your ear canal is called the sphenoid. And that sphenoid bone, it's the same on both sides, of course, is the thinnest bone in your entire skull. And you're sticking those little contraptions in your ear canal there. And it's penetrating the radiation, not just from the individual AirPods, but the way that they are designed inherently. They emit a frequency that connects them to your phone or whatever device you're listening to. But they also, so there's like each individually will be going back to it because they're individually used. And then because you're using them both at the same time, even if you're not using one, you give one to a friend and you put one in your ear, don't ever do that. Just don't wear them in general. But the reason why is because they have to do a relay time connect to make sure that they are playing both the left and the right at the exact same time. So there's an additional frequency that goes between the two. So when they are in your ears, they will take the quickest route, which is your brain. You don't want to do that. So wired is 1000% the way to go in terms of like healthier ears and stuff. And I had Beats headphones. I haven't worn them in probably since I got them like 6 years ago because I was getting migraines left and right. And I stick to my wired, even though they get tangled in my purse. I highly recommend it. And I just wanted to scare everybody straight from those. Okay. If Dr. Dre got the brain bleed, I don't think anyone, it's obvious to me, it was too much use.
I had the inside of my ear burn. Like it felt like I always had one in. And so I had to stop using them. I had to go with the ones that kind of go over the top of your ear.
I think those are slightly safer because I would imagine that those ones are like probably not as powerful, but I know I have, by the way, highly recommend $24.99 on Amazon. I know it's Amazon, but you can get an EMF reader, and actually, even if you live near like a Harbor Freight, maybe they sometimes have them, like a small EMF reader that can detect these things, and it's useful for multiple reasons. You can have those first off. You can find out if your car is being bugged, if your dressing room has cameras or whatever. That's super helpful. But also just in case you are trying to like I do it all the time because I'm trying to get rid of all the signals, and like I'll go through the house when I'm having a really bad migraine and I'm like, what the heck is on? And I'll just take my EMF reader out and walk around and try to figure out what it is that's killing me and unplug everything. But one of those are really, really great. I have a video on my page. I'll put it in Purple Pill of walking around downtown Portland, Oregon, trying to find out where the worst spots of EMF radiation is. Believe it or not, I found out, and I did this test here in Virginia too. The worst places that I've found just driving around a normal city. Well, Portland's not normal, but you know what I mean, a city. The parking structures of malls, if they're attached to the mall, especially underground. Apparently, they keep servers under the ground in the same levels as the parking structures. They are off the charts. Oftentimes, bus stops, big major transit bus stops, really bad. If you're driving a car, obviously the new ones have a lot of Wi-Fi and stuff in them. As much as you try to take it down, it's still something. But when you are driving and you pull up to a red light, I would recommend not to pull up all the way to that line. Like, don't pull up right underneath that light, because each of those lights, very much like your AirPods, they're not only communicating with their general server to stay in time, but they have to keep communication with all the other lights at that intersection, as well as the main system.
That's really interesting.
It's like 10 to 20 times higher if you get right underneath that light or right next to the pole.
And this is that inverse square law again. If you hang back just a few feet, it makes a big difference.
It makes a huge difference. That distance is everything.
Well, that changes my driving patterns because I usually get right up on that line.
Oh, I used to too. And now I'm like, yeah, it's just not worth it.
Yeah. So we only have a few minutes left here with Nick. So I do want to get to Southern Belle and Sally. I had a real quick question for Nick. Do we know anything about EVs? Because now we're driving on top of these giant batteries.
Yeah, again, the car industry is more or less interested in minimizing EMF. So what we find is that my colleagues who do measurements in cars are not able to really give you a very clear answer. What is the safest car? Is it gas powered? Is it hybrid? Is it electric vehicles that are very toxic on an EMF standpoint? It turns out that some gas powered are just as bad as the electric cars because they have so many radars in there. They have a Wi-Fi hotspot in the dashboard. They have Bluetooth. They have, and when I say radars, it's literally radars of proximity, for example. All the modern features in cars are problematic. So it's hard to tell. I would say the EVs can be especially problematic. Some people sit in the car while it's charging. I would never recommend doing that. Another thing with EVs that is in my mind especially dangerous if you use it a lot is when you have batteries underneath the passenger or the driver's seat, which is the case in certain EVs. I would not go for a model like that. And if I had to purchase an EV, I would take measurements with a building biologist. So it's kind of annoying, you try to buy a car that's already worth tens of thousands of dollars, and then you pay a few hundreds to have a professional test it at the car, at the car dealership. So it's kind of stupid, and maybe they're going to kick you out. But, it's very, very difficult to minimize EMFs in a car because it's literally, modern cars are the opposite of, low EMF environment.
Right. Yeah. And this is just one more example of when an issue like this really starts coming up in the general consciousness. The first few people, those first handful of people that care a lot about it really have to go out of their way to find their way. And it's a lot of sort of crowdsourcing information and sharing notes and things like that. And ideally getting it to the point where there's good research happening and often years down the line before real change is happening at the industrial level. Southern Belle and or Sally, did you two still want to go?
Yeah, just real quick, just for a beginner here learning, I have a hard time sleeping because of a car accident with the brain injury. I fall asleep with my laptop and my cell phone, because I've been on spaces late at night. So I'm understanding this may be, again, disrupting my sleep because I wake up exhausted. I don't think I've ever said this, but because of that car accident, I was put into the fibromyalgia category, dealing with all over body pain, cognitive, that brain fog, pain. I work to cut inflammation as much as I can because I reduce pain. I cannot go to sleep without this one drug. And that's my life, but I've been able to manage it. I also have very high pain tolerance, which is not a good thing because I can go to a higher level, be productive, but I'm hurting myself. But what I'm trying to understand is how far away do my cell phone needs to be when I'm sleeping at night? I have to keep it on. I work globally, so I have to be able to get to it. So how far away from the bedroom should it be?
As far away from your pillow as possible, which could be, the other side of the room, on a table, on a desk. Ideally, I would say, if you cannot touch it with an arm's length, that you're starting to get into a good spot because you have, 3 to 4 feet of separation. I would say for people who have had brain injuries, it's very common for them to become especially electrosensitive in the sense that they will feel these exposures. So I don't know if you are able to get a wire from your computer to your router and use a wired connection, look into an Ethernet cable. I would absolutely recommend that and see if you feel better working on the computer if you are on a wired connection. So that will require a wire, and you're going to have to figure things out because most computers do not have that Ethernet port on it. And then you would turn off Wi-Fi, the Wi-Fi antenna on your laptop. But I'm telling you, some people realize, my God, I can think more clearly. I'm more productive. And if you're not, going around the home with your laptop, why not use a wire, and when you're done, you just toss it aside or roll it,
Okay. Well, I think what I can do is just leave my door open. My husband can sleep through anything. But I have a small table outside of my bedroom, so I'm just going to put my laptop and phone there.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, because I can hear it, and it will wake. One of us will wake up, but I have to be available sometimes. Those are urgent issues. So.
Yeah, and I think this is the key here, right? Is recognizing what the relatively simple steps we can take. Like, don't let this freak you out because this is happening. It's all around us. It's just kind of the way it is for right now. The stress of being fearful about these things will actually do more harm than most of these things in and of themselves. So let these sorts of conversations raise our awareness and help us dial in on simple things we can do. And then let's team up and see if we can, as a community, build up to much bigger changes more generally.
Yep.
And I wish you well on that one, Southern. I'm glad you were able to be here for the conversation. I hope it helps. We have just a couple of minutes left, so I want to let Sally go real quick and see if we can get a little more good out of Nick.
So electric blankets. I've been doing research on electric blankets because, I live in Utah. It's cold in the winter and I love crawling into electric blanket, but I've noticed a big difference when using electric blanket. So I've been starting to just turn it on to warm up the bed and then make sure it's off because I don't know how much it puts off, but it seems like it does put off EMFs. What are your thoughts, Nick?
It does. Most electronic these days are built in ways that leak a lot of electricity. And this is electricity that's not going to give you an electric shock, or else, everyone would be screaming and asking for refunds at the manufacturer. But we're talking about the equivalent of a small battery that's going through your body. So the reality is that our bodies are used to an amount of electricity that is essentially zero, at least zero of this type of electricity, which is the AC, alternative current electricity we have running into our walls. So when you have a bed and you have all sorts of different things that are plugged near to it, and a lot of people have power strips and different machines, and then you add your entire blanket is electric and it's plugged into a wall, it just contributes to what's called your body voltage, how much electricity is coursing through your body in a modern electrified environment. And people have found through the help of building biologists who try to help people minimize these levels of body voltage, that the lower your body voltage is, the more likely you are to sleep soundly. So the way you're using it, heating it first, then unplugging, and then enjoying the product is exactly the way I would recommend people use these heating blankets.
Awesome. And Nick, I know you got to go here real soon. I'm curious, as potentially a last question, we have 3 more hands, so if you have more time, that's great, but I understand if you got to go. Is it possible to design these devices in such a way that the EMF that's emitted is actually in harmony with our body and how our own electromechanical systems work?
That's far off. I'd say that's decades down the line, but the easiest way to redesign an electric blanket would have to take into consideration, just tell engineers, can you engineer an electric blanket where the electricity is completely inside the product and doesn't
shielded.
leak one
EMF shielding?
Just electric shielding and proper grounding of the machine. My colleague Brian Hoyer is in the US, a company called the Shielding Shop, and he's engineering such products that can replace everyday products. He engineered a few things like a shielded, grounded power strip that doesn't emit electricity outside the power strip itself. The reality is that cheap electronics are also prone to the same problem as wireless radiation, because there's no safety limits per se. As long as any electronic doesn't give me an electric shock, there's no effect. And the reality is otherwise. The reality is that all these subtle exposures contribute to artificial EMFs that will disrupt our biology. It's not necessarily a question of, will I get cancer or not cancer? Just impacting your sleep quality can impact your short-term and long-term wellness. And that's kind of the point.
Yeah, it affects your immune system.
Yes.
Brian Johnson, of all people, talks about this all the time.
Yep.
He really harps on getting enough sleep because it's one of the #1 things to degrade your health is not getting enough sleep. Do you have a few more minutes with us?
Let's take 2 more and then I'm going to have to run.
No problem, man. I really appreciate it. I think we had Peaceful first and then Adam.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Really interesting conversation. Just 2 quick questions. And you might have already went over this, but would you for me? There's when you have an extender from your computer, so that you get a better signal when you're like
a repeater, like a Wi-Fi repeater.
Thank you, repeater, exactly. Yep. I don't know if you covered that or not, but is that, because I think I would imagine it's going out in like concentric circles or whatever. Is that a big deal?
Well, a repeater would simply take a signal and then repeat it. So it would become, it's just like another router you add to your environment. So in all cases, I would try to create distance between the repeater and the router and where you are during the day. A good example of what not to do is what my dad did at his previous apartment a few years back. When I went to visit him, he had his computer in front of him, his desktop computer with a screen. He had a hard drive, that's sitting there, and next to it was the Wi-Fi router a foot from his face. And I said, Dad, get that, put that in the corner of a room or something, or in a closet, and try to have the Verizon or the IT company to come and move it, because it's just too close to you as you're working. So creating distance is important, and with this repeater or with anything wireless, is turning it off at night or when you don't use it will help you just lower your overall exposure.
Got it. Just one real quick question too. You've heard of these machines that people sell them, and they're, I forgot what they're called, a Ray-Fi or something, where you dial up or down the frequency, and it's supposed to help cure possibly some diseases,
like the Rife machines.
Rife, thank you. Rife. That's
right. Yeah, I did hear about them. I even know doctors who use either Rife or PEMF pulse electromagnetic field technologies. There are beneficial technologies, including light-based technologies, including, invisible light-based technologies, including PEMF. So there are ways to use human-made signals to heal the human body. There's no denying it. In fact, there's plenty of science for the support of use of magnets or of different types of frequencies to heal. But these products are in a category of their own because they're specifically designed with certain frequencies that have been found to be beneficial, certain intensities, and then certain signal characteristics like the modulation pattern or the pulsation rate. And all these things are what makes a signal different from another one. And these things have been, they're all on purpose. They're all created to generate a beneficial effect in the body. To the contrary, if you have a Wi-Fi or smartphone, they've each been chosen to communicate more effectively between one another and not minimize the biological effects. So it's really, when engineers are looking at the right thing, like if they looked at cell phone technologies and they said, how can we interfere the least with everything that's happening in a human cell or in a cell of anything living, then we're going to start seeing improvements in the safety of the wireless. For the moment, there's no intention, there's no incentive, and there's no ruling that says you have to take that into consideration. So that's the main problem. I feel like if we want to see research and development in this situation, first, we're going to have to strong arm the industry in recognizing these dangers, and then let these different players compete over safety. And I hope we're going to see that very soon.
Okay, thank you very much.
Awesome.
Welcome.
And then Adam, if Nick has time for one more.
Let's go.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to thank you for bringing up all this information. It's very important. Bluetooth as well. Me personally, I just try to steer away and lower as much exposure to this stuff as possible. And I think that's the main important thing is, try to keep your devices away from yourself, as Nick had mentioned. And there are things like an EMF shield for cell phones.
Do you have a question, Adam? Because we can keep talking about this once Nick has to go.
Can like possibly, because you were bringing up the EVs, do you think there could be like a EMF shield kind of paint that they could put under the undercarriage to separate from the batteries, or maybe some sort of layer? For instance,
it depends on your budget. If we're talking about magnetic shielding, it's very, very costly. It could be done, if you have the budget for it, but we're talking about probably voiding the manufacturer warranty the moment you start modifying your car in such a way.
I mean, for the car manufacturers.
For the car manufacturers, oh yes. In fact, there are some parts of Tesla are shielded against these exposures. And it's probably just because of questions of electromagnetic interference, not with humans, but with other devices or other sensors. But they're able to do it. Oh yes, we could in fact engineer cars where you might have certain radars, but you make sure that the radar is emitting towards the exterior and not towards users, except you are also blasting people on the street. So I don't know exactly what's the human rights perspective and informed consent about these exposures either. But all that to say that most things could be engineered in a much safer way. To this day, we know there are patents from the 80s owned by Nokia that are sitting on shelves right now that say, here's how to shield a cell phone antenna to make it so that the radiation is not going towards your brain, but going towards the exterior. No one is using them. These are technologies from 40 years ago. So with R&D, I feel like we could potentially have cell phones with 1,000 times less exposure and the same connectivity or better. It's just that right now we're not using the brightest minds in the world. Have them sit in a room and say, guys, you have to rethink the entire smartphone. It maybe then it doubles their costs and they're going to have to pass it to people. So the reality is that it's going to heavily disrupt the industry to have to completely rethink technology in a way that leads to the minimal amount of exposure towards users. But it can certainly be done.
That's really helpful to know. And I guess we're kind of counting on Bobby, on RFK, to do some of these things in his term, because he has talked a fair amount about EMF radiation.
Yeah.
We're going to keep chatting about this as Nick has to go. But Nick, thank you so much. Billy and the Council on Domestic Relations, thank you for bringing Nick into the show today. That was so helpful. Nick, why don't you go ahead and plug your book and this conference you've got coming up again, because everyone can tune into this free conference starting this coming Thursday and learn a lot more than we were able to cover today.
Sounds good. The conference is called the EMF Hazard Summit. It's the 4th year that I put it together. There is a call with Bobby Kennedy that I recorded during his presidential campaign. If you know, there are also 18 other speakers, including EMF scientists, EMF aware doctors, that talk specifically on how to protect the next generation against these exposures. Because of course, we as adults are impacted, but the kids are impacted twice as much, if not more. They absorb more radiation, and then the effects cumulative over a lifetime are even more concerning compared to adults. So that's the focus of the summit, and I want to inspire everyone from, you know, expecting parents to parents of young children to parents of teenagers to grandparents to learn about these dangers and be able to talk about it more, you know, with confidence with their loved ones. So that's the summit, EMFHazards with an S.com. And then my book is called The Non-Tinfoil Guide to EMFs, available on Amazon, or emfbook.com is a short link to get to my website and learn about the book. It's from 2017, still very relevant to this day.
Awesome. And the link for the EMF Hazards Summit is in the nest. I want to encourage everybody to follow Nick here on X. And Nick, I want to encourage you to spend some more time on X if you can get yourself to do it, because I do think the community here on this platform is now very ready for your message. And I know a lot of us here would be more than happy to help give you a signal boost.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. You made this a great conversation. And as Nick exits, we can definitely keep talking about it if people have more on their minds. Nick, take care, man.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, Nick. Thank you.
Man, he was awesome. That was so good.
Yes. Hey, Damo. So we are going to be having our Manic Monday space at 4:00, where we will probably continue this conversation as well. So I just wanted to let you know that, and I'm actually in the process of scheduling it right now so I can throw it up in the nest.
Awesome. When is your hard stop for this one?
At 4:00. I got to start that one.
Okay,
well,
great.
For streaming, I got to stop in about 5 minutes because I got to get ready for the other one.
Oh, okay. Well, we don't need to shut it down if the conversation is still good, but if it's finding itself at a good endpoint, then we'll cut it off, because I don't want the archives to miss the good. Well, it's recording. If the conversation's rolling, we'll keep rolling. America Mission, thank you guys so much. Always such a pleasure.
Well,
I'm gonna bring Johnny.
You can always more than welcome to come on in there. We are going to continue this conversation as well. But we're going to also talk about some of the other poisons and stuff like that we were talking about at the beginning of this conversation. So
Great. Really appreciate it. Johnny, sorry we weren't able to get to you while Nick was here. What's going on, man?
No, that's all right.
Oh, you're a robot. Beep, bop, boop. Johnny.
Johnny the robot.
Yep. If you need to drop and come back in, that's cool, but we'll get you.
Wow, that was so much good information.
Yeah, and it feels like there were 20 more questions that we probably could have asked. Like
Yeah.
I'm really interested in how we can just design our electrical infrastructure to be in harmony, right? Because if we're electromagnetic and it's electromagnetic, why can't it just work a little more closely to the way we work? And it does seem like the nearer term options are just to do proper shielding, and have some basic mitigation tactics, like keeping the emitters more than a few feet away from our heads and our groins, right?
Well, it's like, I mean, how do they not like make those good decisions? Like, I get it. It's all about money and bottom line.
Yeah, they don't
so
care.
severe.
And if you get really into the foil, maybe they want to depopulate us. I don't know. I
We are
don't
the
know, but
carbon
that's
they're
certainly in
trying
the
to emit.
conversation, right? Yeah, it's scary stuff either way. I'm just so disappointed at how much they don't seem to care as long as they profit. That's what really bothers me. Yeah, and I find it to be a general misalignment in our economy where companies serve their shareholders and quarterly profit versus serving sort of a greater purpose and seeing more long term. And so when I think about how much I support free market economics, I think a lot about how stakeholders need to be aligned. And so the ideal version of a corporation to me is actually owned by its customers. And as much as possible, the people working for that corporation are also customers. So you square the circle of the stakeholders, because a customer does not want a poisoned product. And so if they're the ones that are financing the business, there's no incentive to create a poisoned product. And if those customers are then also the ones staffing the business, there's just an extra level of alignment with the purpose and the product and the distribution. But that may be a really good conversation for another day or many other days, is how to align stakeholder interests in capitalism. Johnny, is your signal better, buddy?
Maybe. How about now? How's this
Sounds
sound?
good, man.
Well, all right. Well, I just want to throw out a metaphor, you know. So we've got, you know, Kennedy's been catching a lot of criticism this last weekend for, you know, going down to Texas and making some comments. And one of them being in there was that, you know, he kind of just said that MMR vaccine is the best way we can stop the transmission of measles. And, you know, I just wanted to give my take on it because, man, he is getting pilloried by so many people. And it's like, guys, he has done a lot since he's been in there. He's started a special vaccine injured subdivision that's going to actually not gaslight those who have been injured, get real data from that. You know, he put the likes of Jay Bhattacharya in there, who's going to be getting after the real science, get that unbiased research that we need, that we don't have. You know, Laura Lee, she put up such a great post today. We're giving that MMR vaccines to millions of people, and there's 8 studies on less than 350 kids that supposedly said, oh, it's safe enough, and that was for 6 weeks worth of testing, like a 42-day window. This is crazy. And you know, Kennedy's what else? He's kind of emphasized, you know, it's all about nutrition, it's about sanitation, talking about the remedies that people can do, like vitamin A. And you know, we want the mRNA vaccines pulled off the market. I'm with everybody on that 1,000%. It's like, this was a crime against humanity. But honestly, if we look at what's going on, just 2 weeks ago, Donald J. Trump, President Trump, was bragging